Hey everyone, welcome to another installment of Echo Worm Live. This is a live stream that we do every couple of weeks here on the channel where we just go through some questions that you guys have had on the channel and talk about kind of all of the books that are on the channel, the future of the channel, and things that you'd like to know, that sort of thing. So, welcome to everybody who's already in the chat. I see Flick Street Productions is there. Hey Ty, hope you like my radiation effect theories that I've posted on the Discord chats. I have. I'm always happy to talk about the radiation effect. I love hearing your guys' theories about where the rest of the book is going from here. And if you guys want to join the Discord to talk about the radiation effect or anything else, maybe we'll talk a little bit more about Discord in the future here. But I wanted to start with some pre-prepared questions here. If you guys have any questions you want to ask in the chat, you're more than welcome to do so. If you are watching after the fact and you don't have access to the live chat anymore, just drop them in the comments and we will get to them the next time we do a live stream. Typically, like I said, 2 weeks from today. 2 weeks from yesterday is the 24th, so it'll probably either be the 24th or the 25th of April the next time we do one of these. But we start with a few very similar questions, kind of the usual things to start things off. Misa Wright asks, when is Book 3 of Trials of Apollo coming? Grey Trank says, where's the rest of Trials of Apollo? Brinfinity says, are you going to finish the Trials of Apollo? Davis Jackson says, any chance you could release The Burning Maze any sooner? And Deviant Smith asks, where is The Burning Maze? So for you guys that don't know how we do things on the channel, typically we do 2 chapters a day, one of a Rick Riordan property in the morning and one non-Rick Riordan property late at night. And so right now we are going through Aragon as well as The Burning Maze, which is the 3rd book in the Trials of Apollo series. And then once all of those chapters are out on this channel, we compile them into kind of this full form video, typically less than 10 hours. Otherwise, I'll split it in 2 like you see with Aragon, and then that'll go up on our other channel, Echo Worm. This one here is airing on Echo Worm Audiobooks. So if you guys are unfamiliar with the 2 different channels, that is kind of the way things work. So right now we are going through The Burning Maze. We are through, I want to say, the first 40 chapters or so. I think there's 47 chapters. Once we are done with all 47 chapters, then that will be up in full on the other channel. I believe it airs next Saturday, so not tomorrow, but the following Saturday. The Burning Maze will be out, and then we'll move on this channel directly over to the 4th book, The Tyrant's Tomb. If you do want to skip ahead of the channel, you are more than welcome to do so. We do have a Patreon page where you can go and skip ahead of the channel by about 2 months. Right now, we are about halfway through the final book in the Trials of Apollo, the Tower of Nero, and we are also almost done with Divergent. So how we're doing things over there, like I said, we're about a month and a half to 2 months ahead of this channel. You guys are more than welcome to join if you want to and have the financial capability of doing so. It's $5 a month or more over there. There's a link in the description below. Let's go to a question from Trinity Quinn, who asks, do you plan on doing the Magnus Chase trilogy? Yes, my goal is to, as soon as we're done with Trials of Apollo on this channel, the next day we're going to air The Sun and the Star, which is kind of the last book in the timeline of all of the Greek stories that Rick Riordan has written. And then after that, then we're going to move on to Magnus Chase. So there are 3 Magnus Chase books. That's kind of how I'm going to end Rick Riordan until he releases new books, like he will in September. Forever HK says, finally made it to a live chat. Thanks for doing these. Absolutely, I'm happy to do so. eMover says, are you going to make more Diary of a Wimpy Kid audiobooks? Yes, the 6th one should be coming out May 5th. It's currently out on Patreon if you want to skip ahead. Typically, I do 1 Diary of a Wimpy Kid book every couple of months or so. Same with, there's some other series that we go through like that. Every couple of months, we'll do a new series of Unfortunate Event book. Those might be the only 2 off the top of my head. We were doing every 2 months with the Shadow Children sequence, but those are finished now. So every 2 months, you'll see a new Diary of a Wimpy Kid book. Next one comes out May 5th. Flick Street Productions says, I honestly didn't like the Cersei chapter in Sea of Monsters. I always skip it. It doesn't really belong much in the book and could do without it. Yeah, the Sea of Monsters... So there's an issue with the first 2 books, in my opinion, and especially Sea of Monsters, where Rick Riordan is trying to fit in way more mythology than fits in the story naturally. And with Sea of Monsters, what he was really trying to do was recreate the Odyssey. And so we see that with a whole lot of characters. The one character we don't really see in Sea of Monsters is Calypso, but she does show up in later books, obviously. But we get Circe, we get Scylla and Charybdis, we get kind of all of the big plot points in the Odyssey then put into Percy Jackson. And so some of it feels a little shoehorned, so I completely agree with you there. Question from Ethan Oven, who says, where is part 2 of Aragon? This is echoed by Ice Cream Maker, who says, where did part 2 go? It didn't go anywhere, it's just not out yet. So I mentioned at the start of this live stream, how we do things is we have 2 separate channels, right? So Echo Wirm is where we do all our full form content, and then where this is airing is Echo Wirm Audiobooks. And here on this channel is our daily release schedule. Right now we're going through Aragon. We're almost done with the book. I think, let's see here. I think it concludes in maybe 2 weeks, and then both parts 1 and 2 will be up over on the other channel. So once all of the chapters are out, typically I'll release a full version of it. Because Aragon is so long and I can't fit it all into a 10-hour full form video, I split it in half and released part 1 when we were done with all of those part 1 chapters. Excuse me. Let's go to a question from Sarcastic King Dude, who asks, how expensive is your Patreon? It's $5 a month at the minimum tier, and that you get literally access to everything. There is nothing in my upper tiers that I hide from my lower tiers. How the upper tiers work is everything above $5 a month or more, you basically get your name in the credits at the end of videos and during live streams. So, for example, let's give a shout out to all of my above $5 tier patrons. My League 2 tier, that's $10 a month or more. Brandon Doty, Mr. Taper, Rockin' Ryan 99, X-Ray, Rania, Katie Rose, Nickerdoodles, Hessa, Srinija Srinivasan, Suzanne William James, Squish, and Jared Parnell. $15 a month or more is my League 1 tier, that's Sneavatics. And my Champion tier, those are $25 a month or more. With an extra bonus, those are John Buck, Donald Easter, Dalton Bailey, Lydia Bryant, Joseph Morrill, Zhukov Crawford, and Set. And now that extra kind of tier, or that extra benefit for my Champion member tier, is you guys get a free book at the beginning of every month for no extra cost. The $25 a month or more covers everything, including shipping. So if you join the $25 a month or more tier, if that's something you're interested in, I will physically send you a copy of every book that we are reading at the start of every month. So for example, just this month, I believe I sent Divergent to all of the people in that tier, unless there's something specific that you want. One person wanted a signed copy of the new Hunger Games book, so I sent her that one. But if you're interested, those are the Patreon tiers. Like I said, you get everything there for $5 a month or more. Link is in the description of this live stream if you want to join. Question from Arturo Martinez, who says, how many chapters are in Aragon? It's either 58 or 59. I can't remember when you're counting the prologue. I think it's 59. So right now, I think I said something like 12 to 14 days. Then we'll be done with the whole book, and then we'll move on to Divergent. And then after Divergent, then we'll go back to the Aragon or the Inheritance Cycle series and do Eldest is the second book. Flick Street Productions says, about the radiation effect, I think you once said that you plan to introduce a future main character that is a musician and a singer, like Lucy Graybeard from Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. Yeah, she's already been introduced. The question that I kind of raised in the Discord server is, eventually I think I'm going to make her a POV character. And my question was, would it be too off-putting for her to jot down some of her thoughts and notes in song lyrics and in poems? Because I know for a lot of people with the Hunger Games has always had song lyrics in it, but when we got to Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, a lot of people were really put off by the fact that there were so many song lyrics. And even in this new book, there's a lot of poetry in there that a lot of people weren't expecting, especially toward the final chapter. But my curiosity with asking the question in the Discord server was, would that be too off-putting given the POV narration that we've had so far? But yes, my intention at the moment is to do that in probably book 4. Forever HK says, can I ask where you're from? You have the perfect reading voice. Well, thank you very much. I'm from Minnesota, so northern United States, close to the Canadian border. My accent pops through. I'm a little sick. You guys can probably hear it in my nose. But thank you. Dinsara Cubing says, can you post your Narnia videos on YouTube? I cannot. There's a few different properties that we seem to talk about this every couple of weeks during our live streams. There are a few properties that the way YouTube's copyright system works is if a creator, and by creator I mean someone with copyright ownership over any of these series. So for Percy Jackson it'd be Rick Riordan, for Harry Potter it'd be J.K. Rowling or Scholastic. Any of these people that own copyright can put in a claim on anyone's video that has anything to do with their material, that uses their material in their videos. And whether or not it's legal through fair use copyright, which it is, and we typically, we could fight against it, YouTube sides with them over the content creators like us. And it's a lot harder to fight back against YouTube's algorithm. You've already lost your channel at that point if you have too many strikes. And so the best thing to do is just to try not to antagonize any people and just kind of back off. And that's been the case with Harry Potter for us. That's been the case with the Chronicles of Narnia, Spiderwick Chronicles, Hunger Games. So all of those properties are still available to you for free, just not on our YouTube channel. So there's links in the description below. I mentioned Patreon. You can also be a member on Patreon for free without having to pay anything. And you should have access to all of our Harry Potter content, all of our Hunger Games content with the 5th book coming out this weekend, as well as all of those other properties that I mentioned before. They're also available on Vimeo. If you want, Vimeo is more similar to YouTube in terms of a platform. It's more ease of access in terms of watching videos. But both of those options are available for free to you in the description below if that's something you're interested in. Reading our Chronicles of Narnia audiobooks, reading our Harry Potter, Hunger Games, Spiderwick Chronicles, and Fablehaven is the 5th big one that I always forget about. Let's go to a question from Christina Boblet, who says, what is world schooling? It's something mentioned in the Kane Chronicles. Good question. So world schooling is kind of how Carter describes his education. And he was raised by his father, right? And his father being an archaeologist, basically he traveled the world with his father and did homeschooling with his father around the world. So he grew up just traveling and doing school around the world. It's very similar to what child actors do typically to get their education. But that is when Carter refers to world schooling, that's what's going on with him, is he's being homeschooled as they travel around the world. Flick Street Productions says, I didn't know that character was already introduced in the radiation effect. Have they appeared already or not? I'm a little confused. If they're a spoiler, then you don't have to tell me. I don't think it's a spoiler. It's Morgan, the character that Kent meets in Chapter 8 and really never appears again except by mention. So it's not really a spoiler. I've mentioned it in the chat several times. So my intention is to bring back Morgan eventually as possibly a POV character. Let's go to a question from... Very similar questions from a few people. Rowan TV says, Chalice of the Gods comes after the 5th book, right? Annabeth Wisegirl, says, what is the next book after The Last Olympian? And Amina Noor says the same thing. What is the next book after The Last Olympian? So to answer the final two, because they're all very similar, the Percy Jackson series is kind of written out of order. And so you have the first 5 books, which ends with The Last Olympian. And the book that comes after The Last Olympian in the series isn't actually the next Percy Jackson book, which is Chalice of the Gods. In between those two is an entire separate series called The Heroes of Olympus. And so Percy and Annabeth appear in those. It is part of their storyline. So the book after The Last Olympian is called The Lost Hero. And the Heroes of Olympus series goes from The Lost Hero all the way to book 5 called The Blood of Olympus. And after The Blood of Olympus, that's when it jumps back to the new Percy Jackson books, which is book 6, 7, 8. The first one is Chalice of the Gods. So the book right before Chalice of the Gods is Blood of Olympus. The book right after The Last Olympian is The Lost Hero. So 5, back to Percy Jackson, and then Trials of Apollo, and then Nico is kind of the order that things go in. If you check out our playlist for the Camp Half-Blood Chronicles, it should have everything listed in chronological story order, not the order that they were released in. Let's go to a question from Fatima Almeida, who says, why is Setne kind of Irish? That's not what I was going for. I was definitely going for a New York accent with Setne. I'm curious why you think it sounds Irish, because in my opinion, those are very, very different accents. If you want to hear me do an Irish accent, you can listen to my Artemis Fowl recordings. I did the whole thing in an Irish accent, with the exception of a few British characters. But that's more what Irish sounds like to me. I'm not going to defend my position too much, but Arthi Ravi says, where the heck is Percy in The Lost Hero? Good question. That's why a lot of people get confused by switching from Last Olympian to The Lost Hero, is because it's not a Percy Jackson book. It's written from a completely different POV. It's in third person with new narrators, and Percy doesn't appear in the first book. Percy appears in the second book. I would not skip the first book if I were you. Some people do. I think you lose a lot of character bonding that the reader gets with the new characters in the first book, and you understand Annabeth a little better in the future books. But Percy's location is kind of a secret. So if you're not all the way through The Lost Hero, I don't want to spoil anything for you, but he doesn't appear in the first book. Forever HK says, how did you get into making audiobooks? Can you share a little about your journey to get here? Yeah, I typically do once a live stream. So the backstory to why I started making audiobooks is a little over 2.5 years ago, my wife was pregnant with my first son. And I got in an accident where I basically could have lost my life in the extreme scenario, could have lost my face in kind of the more mundane scenario. What ended up happening is about half of my face was broken off. I lost a lot of hearing in my right ear, and it really, because she was pregnant at the time, it really got me thinking about, what kind of legacy am I leaving behind for my kids if something were to happen to me that I didn't come out of it. And one thing that I really enjoyed when I was growing up was the ability to read with my parents, and the voices that my parents did when they read to me, because I've been a fan of books my entire life, and I started recording myself reading all of my favorite books from my childhood, and those included Harry Potter, those included Percy Jackson. And then once I had them finished, and by the time my son was born, I really didn't have anything to do with them, so I just uploaded them to YouTube. And it didn't really catch on until the Percy Jackson series came out, the TV show, and then all of a sudden the channel went from like 100 subscribers to 10,000 within like a month. And it's just progressively been growing since then. I want to say we're just shy of 20,000 on both channels, which is really cool. So actually, that's not true. 13,000 on both channels, right? I'm just going to check because I don't want to overinflate my ego. Yeah, it's just under 13,000 for both channels. So together it's about 26,000. But that's how I started making audiobooks, and people have been giving me requests for other stuff. There's stuff from my childhood that I wanted to read on the channel, and basically been doing this about 2.5 years now. So that's the backstory to it. I enjoy doing it. It gives me motivation to read things. My wife makes fun of me because she always tells me she doesn't know anybody who reads as much as I do, which is fair. I am usually reading about 4 to 5 books at a time. And actually, in my case, with everything, I typically do a chapter of maybe 30 different book series once every 2 months. And so I'm kind of reading 30 books at once at the moment. But typically, it's just the 2 different series that we're going through on the channels. Flickstreet Production says, I like your idea of Morgan's thoughts being put into songs and poems later on in the series. I'd be interested in seeing that happen for her as a POV person. Up to you, but that's my opinion. Yeah, that's kind of the goal. Just to kind of almost intentionally break up the way that I typically do things. And I think in order for, I'm not going to spoil anything for what happens in later books, but in order for the scenarios that she and another character are in later on in the series to have their full weight, I think I need her perspective too. And so that's why I think I need to have her as a POV, if just for 1, maybe 3 chapters in the entire book. But yeah, I think I'm going to do that. Forever HK says, so glad you're still here, alive and well. Thank you for sharing your talents and creating such a beautiful legacy for your family. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it, and I really do love what I do and love my family even more. So thank you guys for supporting us. I always mention, like, this isn't my main job. I have a full-time job outside of YouTube. But just kind of the little extra wiggle room that you guys give over on Patreon is fantastic. I don't make any money here on YouTube, but you guys supporting me on Patreon, buying things from the merch link down below is always awesome to see. So thank you guys very much. Let's go to a pre-prepared question from Luke Teeter, who says, will you be reading the Brooklyn House book after Serpent's Shadow? Well, it's been a while since I finished Serpent's Shadow, so the answer is no. But am I going to read it eventually and hopefully soon? Yes. If you look, I got to remember which... There we go. This far left book here is the Brooklyn House Magician's Manual, which is one of those, like, if you're familiar with the Percy Jackson side books, it's kind of like the Demigod Files, but for the Kane Chronicles. Each series kind of has one or a few. And yes, I am intending on doing it eventually. I'm intending on recording every single Rick Riordan mythological book at some point. I've done a couple short stories. I'm going to try to get through his entire mythology chronology, with the exception of maybe like the Ultimate Guides, because those are more like dictionaries than anything. It's not really a narrative, but when it's like a short story compilation like that, then yes, I will do that. Let's go to a question from Mason Sway, who asks, are you planning on reading the Zero Enigma series by Christopher G. Nuttall? I'm not familiar with it, but I can check it out and maybe add it to my list. I am still taking requests, but be aware that my request list is weighted and very extensive. So it may be several years before I get to all of the requests that are sent my way. Someone just asked if I could do Keeper of the Lost Cities over on Patreon. And I said, yes, but it might be a while. Let's go to a question from Leo Valdez, who says, will you release the whole Trials of Apollo series? Yes, right now, I mentioned this earlier, right now we are currently on the 5th book over on Patreon. We're about 2 books ahead of what is airing on the channel. So if you want full access to all the first 4 stories, and skip ahead of the channel by about 2 months, you can do that over on Patreon with the link below. It's $5 a month or more. Eventually, we'll do all of Rick Riordan's books, including Magnus Chase, which will come after Trials of Apollo. Framington says, what is the radiation effect? Good question. So if you keep hearing us talk about the radiation effect, that is my own personal book. I have been writing a book for the last year and a half in kind of a rough draft form. Once I get done with each chapter, it will air on the channel. And the first 26 chapters are up on this channel if you want to read them. It's got this big red thumbnail, just kind of a generated picture of what will be the climax of the book if you want to read it. But first 26 chapters are available. I typically do a new chapter every few weeks or so. So if you want to check it out, you're more than welcome to do so. Flixtree Production says, I can't help but feel that one of Carter's dad's goals for what he did in the Red Pyramid was, aside from stopping Apophis, to revive his wife out of grief over losing her. Yeah, I think so. Yes and no. I think the biggest thing with him is because of his combination with, Osiris, right? Because of his kind of cohesiveness with Osiris, he kind of understands the bonds of death a little better than he would have at the beginning of Red Pyramid. Maybe that's the situation you're referring to. Because that is what he's really trying to do, is to save her at the beginning. Or to... Yeah, I would agree with you there. Later on in the series, I think he has more of a grasp on death and the combination of those things. Let's go to a question from Cassie Face, who says, is your podcast still available on Spotify? Yes. We did a podcast last summer where instead of just reading audiobooks, we were kind of going through the first Harry Potter book and detailing it, like going in detail and analyzing each chapter kind of in more detail than, you would be just reading a book out loud. You can find that by searching for Echo Worm on Spotify or looking for The Echo Chamber by Echo Worm. There's also links to other Spotify content in the description of this video below if you want to check that out. But that is the only thing that we've done over on Spotify due to copyright reasons. The reason we can't have our audiobooks over on Spotify has to do with their copyright regulations. You have to have very express written permission from the copyright holders to use content. It's not just a fair use clause the way YouTube's is. But I've also had questions about whether or not we're going to continue that podcast at any point, because we only did the first Harry Potter book. And the answer to that is yes, but only if it gets more viewership. I don't have the free time to both record as many audiobooks as I'm doing at the moment, as well as do a podcast every week. And so in order to make that work, we'd probably just need more consistent viewership, because I am going to prioritize, the videos where I'm getting thousands of views at one time rather than a podcast that's only getting 25 listeners per episode, if that makes any sense. Let's go to a question from Abby Ashton, who says, how does Luke not die in Battle of the Labyrinth, only to die in the next book? Pacing, because you still have one book left and you can't kill off the main antagonist. It's a good question, though. I think just to build up the tension. Battle of the Labyrinth is my favorite Percy Jackson book, but I understand the frustration that you have with the scene that he's in, if it's the one that I think you're referring to. But yeah, the actual reason is because you can't kill off your main villain before the final installment unless you're Star Wars. Let's go to question from Violet Sanford, who says, I just realized this. Isn't Chiron technically Percy's uncle? Technically, yes. But technically, Annabeth is also Percy's first cousin's daughter. So take it as you will. Mitchell Friedman says, more Percy Jackson, please. I don't know what you mean by more Percy Jackson. I have read all of them. So if you want to clarify your question, I have literally read every single Percy Jackson book, and they are on the channel. Grade A says, is Dune a good book and movie? Yes, in my opinion. As a narrator, Dune is one of the hardest books for me to read, but I think Dune is a fantastic book. I think it's very well written. The pacing is very good, and the films are very good too. Some people really like the first one and really don't like the second one. Other people really don't like the first one and really like the second one. I'm in the camp that likes the second one better, but I also don't think the first film is that bad. And I'm really excited for them to do Dune Messiah, the sequel. I have done the first two Dune books, and I am currently working on the third one. So hopefully that is up sometime in June on the channel here. Should be a few weeks in advance of the channel over on Patreon. Diz says it's best not to think about the godly relationships. Yeah, it gets kind of messy. Someone a few live streams ago said something along the lines of, Nico is dating his... Oh, was it his dad's nephew's son? So what would that be? His not his cousin's son, would it be? But yeah, it's kind of a mess. Or no, it had something to do with Nico's sister being the lieutenant of Artemis, whose brother was the father of Nico's boyfriend. And I'm like, well, that's a bit more broad than most relationships. Like all of the other relationships are very, very like cousins' kids. You know what I mean? Or cousins directly. There's one point, Apollo hits on Talia. They are siblings, which is weird. But anyways. Mitchell Friedman says, they were great and well-read, just missing them. Keep up the great work, thank you. You're more than welcome to read them again. Very happy that you enjoyed them. Thank you for your feedback. I appreciate it. Jane Gray says, one thing I hate about Rick Riordan is how he treats Hades and Anubis as bad guys. Why do authors do this with characters relating to death? Good question. If you want the really, really nerdy historical backstory to it, it has everything to do with the relationship with death and illness in the Dark Ages, specifically the Black Plague of the 1300s. Death in Western culture for the last 700 years or so has been very, very negative. Everything having to do with death is dark because it destroys the world. And so in the original Greek stories, we don't see the antagonism of characters like Hades and Anubis as often as we do now. But nowadays, because that's kind of the norm, where authors really use death as kind of this dark, evil thing, that's where that comes from, and that's why authors do it. But to a certain extent, we see kind of the redemption of that in characters like Nico. That's the whole point of The Sun and the Star, is taking the darkness that is within him and kind of recontextualizing it, if that makes any sense. Flick Street Productions says, I'm a little confused by Dumbledore's agitation towards Harry not catching on to his point about Voldemort in Half-Blood Prince in Chapter 23. Or was it his frustration about Voldemort's idiocy? Can you clarify what they're talking about in that chapter? Because off the top of my head, I can't remember what the situation is in Chapter 23 of Half-Blood Prince. But I am happy to answer that, because once you say exactly which conversation it is, I'll probably know the answer. Diego Gonzalez says, are you going to do the entire Bible? Yes, that is the goal. It was originally a 3-year project, which should take me to the end of next summer. I think I'm going to have it done sooner than that. I have done the entirety of the New Testament. It's not all out yet, but I've recorded the entirety of the New Testament, working on the Old Testament now. I am all the way through the Minor Prophets. I am working on finishing the Nevi'im and the Ketuvim, and then I'll finish the Torah last. Just because it's going to be the most boring part of detailing all of the numbers and the structures and that sort of thing. But once we're done with the Bible, then I'm going to do some other kind of religious literature, the Catholic Apocrypha, a few C.S. Lewis non-Narnia books, as well as the Book of Mormon too, which already has some chapters out on the channel. So if you want to check those out, if you're into religious literature, I do already have some chapters out on the channel. Bryce Davies says, when are you updating your Black Mirror timeline video? Good question. Black Mirror, if you guys don't know the series, that is what the thumbnail for today's live stream was. Black Mirror Season 7 just dropped yesterday, and I have already put out my review of it on my third channel. You guys can find a link to that in the description below if you guys want to check out my third channel. It's completely unrelated to audiobooks. It has everything to do with me just making content about things that I like in my free time. I'm not as active there as I am over here, but you're more than welcome to join that and subscribe. Hoping to have that Black Mirror timeline done in the next couple of weeks. Because it's Easter next week, I'm going to be a little busier, but after that, I think I'll be able to kind of free my time up and finish more videos like that. Doctor Who also comes out this weekend, and once this new season is done in early June, I believe, then I'm going to do an update to my Doctor Who timeline as well. So if you're interested in timeline videos or just my reviews of TV shows that I like, you're more than welcome to check those out with the link in the description below. Damien Salva says, who is your demigod parent? Good question. People always ask me this. I would say I've always felt a connection to Hades, but I also really like Nemesis and Nike. So pick between those three, whichever you guys think in the little parasocial relationship that we have, who you think my godly parent would be, whether those three or apart from those three. Jermaine says, when are your Patreon-only videos coming out on YouTube? Good question. It's typically about 2 months, give or take, for either direction. So, for example, Aragon is ahead by about a month and a half, and Percy Jackson and the extended series are ahead by about 2.5 months. So I always tell people it's about 2 months ahead if you want to skip ahead over on Patreon, $5 a month or more. It's still the same pace that we have here on this channel, 2 chapters a day, but you get to skip ahead. Excuse me. Get to skip ahead. Right now we're working on Divergent as our non-Rick Riordan book, and we are also working on the final Trials of Apollo book there. The Sun and the Star will also be out on the 27th, I think. So 2 weeks' time, The Sun and the Star will also be out on Patreon as well. Flick Street Productions, in Chapter 23, Harry and Dumbledore talk about Voldemort's Horcruxes, and Dumbledore talks loudly, almost in frustration, when Harry's slow to understand the prophecy. Yeah, I think he's more frustrated at... I think he's more frustrated by, or even amazed by, Voldemort than anything. Because, you know, in the conversations they're having, Voldemort could literally use a Horcrux out of anything, like make a Horcrux out of anything, but he's very arrogant, very prideful, and leaves clues behind that maybe he doesn't even realize that he's leaving behind. And I think Dumbledore raising his voice is maybe a combination of Harry not quite getting it yet, but also feeling just bewildered that Voldemort would be so stupid with all of his Horcruxes. So I think that would be the best explanation for why his voice is as high as it is. He's just fascinated by how many breadcrumbs Voldemort left behind in something that should secure his legacy for eternity, if that makes any sense. Lana says, I'm so happy that you're reading Aragon. It's so much fun to listen to your narration. Well, thank you very much. I am hoping to do the entire series. I don't know when I'll get to Murtaugh, but I am currently working on Eldest as well, in addition to Divergent and the Divergent sequel after that as well. Expert Nate says, hey, Echo Worm, I'm thinking of writing a book like The Radiation Effect. Would you be able to help me? Possibly, yeah. If you wanted to reach out to me over on Discord, I'd be more than happy to talk about it. Would be very curious to see what your series looks like and what you're thinking like for stuff like that. Let's go to a question from Jamie Ferry, who says, which Percy Jackson season are you most excited to see adapted if they do it right? Good question. Probably season 6, if they ever get that far. I would love to see them expand into the Heroes of Olympus, but I really doubt that's going to happen given the pace of how they're releasing the seasons at the moment. They're doing it every 2 years, and by the time we hit that, having all of these kids in 5 seasons of television supposed to be 16 years old and probably having to be near their 30s by the end the season would come out is really confusing to me to think about where they're going with this series. But if they do make it as far as the Battle of the Labyrinth, which is season 4 presumably, I'd be very happy about that because that is my favorite book in the original Percy Jackson series. Forever HK says, can you talk about how you developed Frank Zhang's accent? I'm born and raised in Vancouver, and the accent is very different to how we speak here. Yeah, I've heard that before. It's a Ray Ferraro impersonation. If you know who Ray Ferraro is, he's a hockey commentator. I'm a big fan of Vancouver sports teams. Obviously, you see the Pacific flag behind me. I'm a big Vancouver Canucks fan, and I understand that Frank's accent that I use is very different from the metropolitan accent that is used in Vancouver. But Ray Ferraro is from... Hold on, let me look it up here. He's from British Columbia. But he's from Trail, which is near Kootenays. So what I wanted to do with Frank was have an accent that was noticeable. And I don't think that I could do that with the typical Vancouver accent because it sounds no different from something like Seattle or Portland, typically, to a person that's not from that region. And so I use kind of an overdone Canadian accent, if that makes any sense. And I wanted to do someone that was from British Columbia, period. So it's basically just me impersonating Ray Ferraro. That's where that comes from. Expert Nate says, when do you think the radiation effect will end? If you mean when am I going to finish the first book, my goal is June. It's more realistic that it'll probably be toward the end of the summer at this moment. But it's going to be 35 chapters, the first book. It's going to be 35 chapters for the first book. The series is going to be 7 installments long, which will probably take me 10 to 15 years to complete. Diz says, hopefully it speeds up. I know they renewed for season 3 already, but no clue when shooting for that starts. Hopefully before season 2 airs this winter. Hopefully, but I wouldn't get your hopes up because they greenlit the second season as soon as the first season aired as well. So if anything, it'll be a year and a half between, would be kind of best case scenario, but I'm pretty certain that the next couple seasons, if they continue to greenlight the series are going to come out in 2-year installments, which sucks. Really sucks. Especially when you're dealing with child actors. Excuse me. My voice is getting hoarse. Flick Street Productions says, to follow up from my previous post, I believe he's also bewildered by Voldemort playing into the prophecy instead of avoiding it and ignoring every clear warning sign that turns the tide against him. Absolutely. I think, like, the shortest answer I can give for him raising his voice in that situation is he is fascinated by how stupid Voldemort is. Because he's such a smart guy that he's so arrogant that he oversees all of these things that someone who was less arrogant or more selfless would never make the mistakes of. And so that's why he's, to a certain extent, he might even be seeing parallels with his own arrogance when he was younger and seeing it reflected in a wizard who is not quite as powerful as he is, but as great as he is in terms of magical ability, if that makes any sense. Let's go to a question from Josh Claret, who says, how many chapters are in the Trials of Apollo books? It varies. Same with all of the Percy Jackson books. It varies. I want to say, like, I think the first book maybe has the fewest chapters at like 37 or something like that. The most, I believe, is Burning Maze, which has 47. So it's typically high 30s to low 40s in terms of chapter count. Let's go to a question from Lanybug, who says, what do you think was the most and least necessary death in the Hunger Games series? Good question. I don't want to necessarily spoil... Well, actually, I'm okay talking about the new Hunger Games book because it's been out for 3 weeks. If you guys haven't read it and want to avoid spoilers, I'm sorry. It's a prequel. The combination of it's been out for 3 weeks and it's also a prequel, so we know what happens, means that I think spoilers are okay here. But the most and least necessary death. I think the most necessary death for the series is probably Prim. And the least necessary death. Good question. I'm tempted to say someone like Luella McCoy in terms of the way that it happened, but at the same time that really helped feed into kind of the way Haymitch feels about the Capitol. That's a really good question. I don't know if there's a least necessary death that I would put. It's a really good question. I don't know, to be honest with you. I think there's a lot of very good, very necessary, impactful deaths in the series. Let's see here. Srivatsa Tatapatri says, are you planning to read Magnus Chase? Yes. Once we are done with the Trials of Apollo on the channel, we will do the Nico D'Angelo book, and then we will move on to Magnus Chase. So, in a few installments, then, yeah, we'll move on. Expert Nate says, when Percy's mom gives birth, do you think the baby will be a demigod even though Poseidon is not the father? No, that's not how demigods work. We also already know that she's not because she exists in Trials of Apollo. Forever HK says, it totally makes sense. I get that. The accent here in the lower mainland is exactly like you said. Very much like what you hear in Seattle and Portland and very different from the interior. Yeah, Frank is the only main character where I used a hyper-regionalized accent. Part of why I didn't do one with Percy is I didn't want people to be turned off from the fact that I was reading with a New York accent. Same with Annabeth. Like, I didn't give her a Virginia accent. I absolutely could have, but I think that would sound terrible. I'm bad with East Coast accents to begin with. Characters like Hazel's mom, I gave a regionalized accent. I typically give regionalized accents to French characters. But yeah, with Frank, it's literally just a Ray Ferraro impression. Let's see here. Flick Street Productions says, I feel like they just keep jumping the gun with the Hunger Games prequels by announcing the movie versions of the books before they're published. It's a little frustrating. I'm curious why you think that. from the perspective of Suzanne Collins, it makes a lot of sense to me, because she doesn't need the book to be good in order to make money off of the movie. Like the studio is willing to fund a movie of her book as long as she releases a book. So like, to me it makes sense, but I'm curious if you have any like clarifying thoughts on your thoughts. Srivatsa Tadapatri says, why do you think Prim's death was necessary? Good question. So if you've read the end of Mockingjay, part of what that does to Katniss is specifically tied to her last conversation with President Snow. Because if Prim doesn't die, then Katniss doesn't kill Coin. And then Coin becomes the new dictator of Panem and nothing changes. That is why Prim's death is necessary. Because it motivates Katniss in a way that we've never seen her... Like, we've never seen Katniss act that harsh before. MT Gary Mugger says, just want to say you are an MVP for my long trucking nights. Well, I'm happy to do so. Part of how I got into reading audiobooks in the first place was I was doing driving as well. Just around town doing delivery stuff, and I was listening to books all the time. So I'm happy to do that. It's cool to see other people using my material to do what I used to do with other people's material. So thank you very much for letting me know that. John Neary says, Percy would train her to be good with swords and to be a good fighter just because he loves his little sister. Yeah, I think so. I think Estelle Blofeld is one of those characters who is going to grow up very similar. Well, okay, I don't want to use Sally Jackson and Rachel there as an example because they both have prophetic sight, so it's very different. And maybe Estelle will have prophetic sight in a future book, but I think she's going to be one of those mortals who is aware of the godly world, the mythological world, and be prepared to fight in it, if that makes any sense. Srivatsa Tadapatri says, I also have a recommendation, The Scarlet Pimpernel. I have never read it or heard of it. I will check it out and see if it's worth adding to my list. A few more pre-prepared questions. First one comes from Clara Day, who says, what is your favorite Rick Riordan series? And what is your favorite book in each of those series? Good question. My favorite series as a whole in Rick Riordan's catalog is the Kane Chronicles. I think from beginning to end, it is his most well-crafted, single cohesive piece of a whole series. Percy Jackson, especially when you read the first one, doesn't really feel like the rest of the series was intended the way it ended up being. With the Kane Chronicles, what I feel like from Rick Riordan is that he had a plan for 3 books. He knew exactly the plot points he wanted to hit in each one. He planned it out meticulously. Whereas with Percy Jackson, Heroes of Olympus, Trials of Apollo, he wrote each book one by one. Does that make any sense? And the second half of the question about my favorite book in each of his series, Percy Jackson, my favorite book is Battle of the Labyrinth. House of Hades is my favorite in the Heroes of Olympus. Trials of Apollo, it actually might end up being Tower of Nero. It's been a long time since I read this book, and I'm really enjoying it on my reread. But I think for the sake of... I've read it recently in full, I want to say The Burning Maze. Typically, I'm a fan of like the second to last book in every series. So Harry Potter for me is Half-Blood Prince. But I definitely liked Burning Maze more than Tyrant's Tomb for Trials of Apollo. In terms of my favorite Rick Riordan book overall, I think it would have to be House of Hades. Let's go to a question from Sarah W., who says, is there anything you would change about Mockingjay? Yeah, so I mentioned before, Mockingjay, I think, is the weakest of all of the Hunger Games books, including the prequels. And especially when you consider the film adaptations and they split it in 2, I think Part 1 really suffers, and part of why Part 1 really suffers is they spend way too much time in District 13. And I get why they do it, because it's a district that we've never spent any time in to begin with, and so we kind of have to develop that relationship with them in the first half of the book. There's no place for it But one reason I don't like Mockingjay is because it's the only book in the series that doesn't have a Hunger Games in it. And so tonally it feels, tonally is the wrong word, but pacing-wise and plot-wise, it feels very different from any of the other books. I really like the stuff in the capital. I wish there was more to that. I think we spend too much time in a location that I don't really care about. And even with the extended time that's spent there, I still don't really feel like I care about District 13 that much by the end of the book. Forever HK says, I really enjoyed your rendition of the Shadow Children books. I grew up reading them but forgot what happened by the time the series ended. Thanks for helping me finish them. Absolutely. I'm hoping to have more Margaret Peterson Haddocks out soon. I started the Missing series, which is similar but very different to the Shadow Children. It's, I'm not going to spoil anything, but I have the first book out. It's called Found, but it's in the playlist list labeled The Missing. So I'm hoping to have more of her books out soon. Flick Street Production says, I am reading 2 Kindle Unlimited books that I can't wait to do audiobook readings of. I hope when I do them, you'll hear them. One's a supernatural romantic comedy novel. Interesting. I'm curious what it's called. I just got done with a science fiction romance novel that is going to be up on Patreon this weekend and up on the channel at the end of the month. I'm very much assuming they're not the same, but I'm curious what you're reading. If you guys haven't checked out Flick Street Productions' audiobook channel, feel free to check them out too. Ethan Stagg says, are you planning on doing The Sun and the Star? Yes, I believe we finish Trials of Apollo on Patreon on maybe like the 26th of April, in a couple weeks' time here. And the day after that on Patreon, we will release The Sun and the Star in full. And the same is going to happen on the channel a few months later. I believe it's the middle of July that we will finish the last of the Trials of Apollo books, and then we'll do release it all at once. The new, or the Nico book. And then in September, when the new Nico book comes out, there's going to be a sequel to The Sun and the Star. We'll do that in September as well. Let's see here. Forever HK says, I know you have an overwhelming list of books to read. You're right. That's okay. But would you consider adding the Keys to the Kingdom series by Garth Nix? I think you'd really enjoy them. I want to say they're already on there. I'm familiar with that title, and I'm not sure why, because I've never read it. But if it's not already on there, I will definitely add it there for you. Srivatsa Tatapatri says, I was about to buy Magnus Chase on Audible, but now I'll wait for you to release it. It'll come out this fall. So if you don't want to wait until this fall, then you're more than welcome to buy it and read it on your own. But yeah, it'll start on Patreon in May, I believe, or early June. And then it'll be up on the channel starting in August. John Neary says, what is your opinion on the Percy Jackson TV show? Good question. It was better than the films, but I'm still not a big fan of it. I liked what it did in terms of the first few episodes made me feel like I was in the world in a way that the films never did. I'm really worried about the future of the show because there were things changed in the show that I thought were detrimental to the characters and the plot progression of the characters in the series. Forever HK says the first book is Mr. Monday. Does that ring a bell? No, but I think the series as a whole has been requested before. Let's go to a question from Red Dwarf Planet, who finishes off our pre-prepared questions. So if you guys want to ask more questions, you're more than welcome to do so. It might end up being a bit shorter of a live stream, but I can stay as long as you guys want, as long as you want to keep the chat active and ask as many questions as you want. I'll stay as long as you guys want. So Red Dwarf Planet asks, what are you doing on the channel after Divergent? Good question. So I've mentioned kind of the future of the channel in terms of Rick Riordan, right? So right now we're finishing up The Burning Maze. It should be out in full on the 19th. After that, of course, we'll do Book 4 and Book 5 of the Trials of Apollo series. We're currently on Book 5 on Patreon. After Book 5, then we'll do The Sun and the Star, and after that we'll do the Magnus Chase series. But apart from Rick Riordan, we are currently working on Aragon. Once Aragon is done, then we're going to do Divergent, and then we're going to bounce back and forth between those series. So we'll do Insurgent, then we'll do Eldest, flip that. We'll do Eldest and then Insurgent, and then we'll do the rest of Aragon and the rest of the Divergent series. After that, it's kind of up in the air. Maze Runner is definitely on my radar. I'm hoping to have the first one out before then, actually. But in terms of daily chapter books, Maze Runner for sure. Red Rising probably. A Song of Ice and Fire is on my list as well. And then if we haven't finished all of the original 6 Dune books by then maybe that will be added to the progression there. But Flick Street Productions says, I hear you about Mockingjay not including the Hunger Games. That's almost how Owen Colfer's third and final warp novel, The Forever Man, feels. Diz says, I'm curious why Rick made and or approved of the changes. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe there's something new that he wants to do with the characters that he didn't feel like he could do in the first place. And if that's the case, then I'm looking forward to it. But given what we had toward the latter half of the first season, I'm really, really worried. Optimistic is the wrong word, because I'm cautiously worried about the future of the series. Servanza Tadapatri says, oh, wait, I had a Discover card and I was a member of your Patreon, but they canceled my membership because they no longer accepted Discovery credit cards. Is there an alternative way? I don't know that. I didn't know that about Patreon. If you have an iPhone, or even, I don't know if Google Play has this option, but you should be able to pay through your Apple account if you use it on your iPhone. But I wasn't aware of that with Discover, sorry. Jaman Gupta says, thank you so much for making these audiobooks. I've been listening to them every night for a long time now. Absolutely. Well, thank you very much for being a supporter of the channel and for enjoying the work that I do with these books. Take a sponsorship drink as usual. I don't know if you guys can see it on camera. My fingers are about 5 shades darker than they usually are because I was staining wood this afternoon and I got done. And I got home and I was like, I have to live stream, and my hands are literally like a completely different skin tone than the rest of my body, and it looked really awkward. A very weird tangent to go on here. Emma Kincaid says, what is your favorite book, like, in all? Storm of Swords, which is the 3rd Game of Thrones novel. I always say that it changes, but for the longest time it has been Storm of Swords, and I think it's going to stay that way for a long time now. John Neary says, I do have to thank you for getting me into the Percy Jackson series. I just started reading The Titan's Curse and reading the part where Percy is so painfully aware of the fact that Annabeth is taller than him. Yeah, Rick does a really good job. Part of why he does a good job is he was writing the series about his son. His son Haley is basically who Percy is based off of. And so being able to see his son's insecurities and write them into Percy is very fun for the first few books. Titan's Curse is a good example of that. That's probably the book where Percy is the most insecure about himself and his relationships with other people. Emma Kincaid says, did you like the first season of Percy Jackson? If not, why? I don't know that I outright disliked it. Like I said, the first few episodes I really enjoyed. My biggest gripes with it that I mentioned a few minutes ago is it feels like the characters are changed from who they are in the books. I like the books because I like the characters. And I always have to clarify that my dislike of Annabeth in the show has nothing to do with her casting. It has everything to do with the way she's written. Like, I could not care less who is playing Annabeth. I don't like the fact that she's written in a way that is different from the way she's written in the book. And by that, I mean her obsession with Luke is kind of non-existent. The chemistry with Percy is different. Her motivations for doing the things that she does are different. The ending of the series, the way that she reacts to the ending of the first season in seeing Luke betray them, is very different. And I don't like that. I don't like the way that they changed the characters. I don't like the way that they changed the plotline with Zeus and Poseidon. I don't like the way that Hades was portrayed in the series. I'm cautiously pessimistic going forwards. I liked Percy Jackson Season 1 better than I liked the live-action Avatar. But I'm more optimistic for the future of the Avatar series than I am for Percy Jackson, if that makes any sense. Flickstream Productions says the supernatural romantic comedy novel I'm referring to is called Ghosty, a paranormal romantic comedy. Just wanted to tell you because you asked. Yeah, absolutely. The book I read is called Obsidian. It's by Jennifer Armentrout. The sequel is behind me over this shoulder. It's called Onyx. So, hoping to do those every 4 or 5 months on the channel, as long as I continue to enjoy reading them. I want to talk about the future of the channel here for a second. I'm going to stare to the left of the camera here at my large pile of immediate read books. Right now, like I mentioned, we are finishing up over on Patreon the 5th Trials of Apollo book, Divergent. I'm currently working on the sequel to The Giver, which is called Gathering Blue. I'm finishing up The Sun and the Star, which is going to be on Patreon in 2 weeks' time. I'm also working on Children of Dune, the 3rd Dune book, a nonfiction book about the wrestling company AEW. I'm working on Fablehaven Book 2, which should hit Patreon coming out very, very soon. Working on Book 2 of the Missing series by Margaret Peterson Haddix. Working on The Maze Runner. Working on Game of Thrones, which is almost done and should be up available for free at the beginning of June. Working on Book 2 of Aragon. Working on Book 7 of Diary of a Wimpy Kid. Working on House of Cards. Working on Fire and Blood, the prequel novel to Game of Thrones. In addition to that, currently working my way through Magnus Chase. That should hit the channel starting in August. Should be up on Patreon starting in June. In addition to the 3rd book in the series of unfortunate events, which is called The Wide Window. Behind me. Is it called The Wide Window? Yes, it is, because the second one is a reptile room. Behind me, you guys can see Book 2 of the City of Ember series, or the Books of Ember, called The People of Sparks. More Book of Mormon stuff, more Sherlock Holmes stuff. Red Rising, The Witcher, Book 2 of Divergent. The Nicholas Flamel series that you guys have been asking for years. Also working on The Hobbit, which will be followed by The Lord of the Rings. The Avatar spin-off novels. Twilight, Artemis Fowl 3, Star Wars, Onyx, and more Giver. Let's go to... Srivatsa Tatapatri says... Actually, I'm going to come back to that question because question from Jedi Guardian says, when will the second part of the Star Wars The Labyrinth of Evil be coming out? I have not read the first part of Labyrinth of Evil. So I don't know what you mean by when is the second part coming out. I have no idea. It is not on my radar. I am finishing up a Ryder Wyndham novel for Star Wars, and then I'm going to move on to the Thrawn series. Back to Srivatsa Tatapatri. What's your character review of Snow? I'm currently listening to The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. Snow is my favorite character in the entire series. I think his backstory, his motivations, and the way that he deals with his own personal problems are fascinating. He's a very well-written character. I enjoy his backstory more than maybe I should. I think compared to most, I really, really do enjoy The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes more than most people. It's probably my second favorite book in the series. I know a lot of people have issues with it. I think it's my second favorite book in the series. Also out of the book, are you currently following WWE? Yes, I am. Yes, I'm a big wrestling fan. Meili Lay says, The Trials of Apollo has me on the edge of my seat so far. Are you enjoying it? I love Lester. Yeah, I'm actually pleasantly surprised by how much I like the final book. I was, I don't really enjoy the Trials of Apollo as much as I do the other series. But it's progressively gotten better, especially with Book 3. Book 4 was kind of at that level. I didn't like it as much as Book 3, but Book 5 I think I'm having a lot of fun with. I'm very interested and curious to see how this book ends. Jedi Guardian says, would you do 2005 King Kong audiobook? How would I do that? It's a film. Forever HK says, do you have Ender's Game and Ender's Shadow by Orson Scott Card on that list? Is there a way to see what's on your list, or do you just discuss it on the live stream? Yeah, it is on my list, and actually, so I'm going to show you a list, and it's not concrete. So I want you to be aware that things are willing to change on this list. But let me flip over for a second here. Let's go to this screen here and this screen here. And there you should see, I'm going to do my best to keep things above my face because I have a bad habit of covering things up with my face in the bottom corner. But all of this bolded stuff here at the top are things that are already out or done recording. So for example, right now we are through Nightfall. Nightfall is the most recent thing to be released on the channel. That came out on the 8th earlier this week. Sunday, Sunrise on the Reaping will be available to you guys for free. It is currently available through the 26th chapter on Patreon. It'll be available to you for free on Patreon and Vimeo on Sunday. It won't be available on YouTube because of restrictions with the upcoming film, but like I said, for free on Sunday. I'll make posts about it and everything like that. Burning Maze is coming out next Saturday on the 19th. Aragon will be up in full in both parts on the 22nd. That first book in the Lux series that I mentioned earlier is coming out on the following Monday. Then we're doing book 6 of Diary of a Wimpy Kid coming out on May 6th. It's currently already available over on Patreon. Then Fablehaven book 2 is coming out on the 13th of May is the current plan. Divergent should be available on the 31st. It's currently almost done on Patreon if you want to skip ahead. Then we have The Tyrant's Tomb, which will air in full on June 1st. Game of Thrones should air over on Patreon and Vimeo early in June. Children of Dune, Book 3 of Dune, will be up June 10th. Gathering Blue, which is the second book in the Giver series, should be up on June 17th. Then The Maze Runner should be up at the end of June, hopefully. Tower of Nero to finish off the Camp Half-Blood Chronicles series will be available on July 10th. Sun and the Star, I have these numbers wrong, should come out the next day. Wide Window, which is the third book in a series of unfortunate events, should come out on the 22nd of July. People of Sparks, which is the second book in the Books of Ember series, should come out at the end of July. And then from there, that's where it gets a little more unpredictable. In addition to the series that we've already covered, book 2 of the Missing series, I have it slated for August. The first House of Cards book I have slated for September. Let's see here. Artemis Fowl 3 in October. Star Wars, I'm hoping to continue at the beginning of next year. The Avatar novels, hoping to start releasing those early next year as well. Same with The Witcher. And then we move on to stuff like the Alex Rider series and Red Rising and the Ark of a Scythe series. So beginning of next year calendar-wise is when we're going to get into some new stuff. I may add, if there's more requests for it, like you said, Orson Scott Card and the Ender's Game series there as well. So that's kind of the immediate future, and like I said, it's willing to change based on how many requests I get to move stuff up in my kind of my catalog there. Jedi Guardian says, after the King Kong 2005 movie was released, someone made a book of it. My rule on the channel is I'm not reading what do they call it? So for example, like if someone wanted me to read the novelization, thank you, that's the word I was looking for. I'm not doing novelizations because you can already watch the film. If like the whole point of what I do with audiobooks is I typically do it for people who don't have the ability to read it or the time to read it themselves. You could put an earbud in and watch the film or listen to the film, and you'd get as much as you would out of me narrating the book. So no, I probably won't be doing that. Very, very specific circumstances where that rule may be broken, but as of now, my rule is no novelizations on something that is originally based on a film. The Star Wars novels are different because the books that I'm reading for Star Wars aren't based on the films. They're just based on the characters from the films, if that makes any sense. Servan Satata Patri says, I'm curious to know what your theory is regarding John Cena's heel turn. I think he's going to win at Mania and lose at SummerSlam to CM Punk. Would be my best guess at the moment. Emma Kincaid says, how do you feel about the romance involved in Trials of Apollo? Good question. Really good question. And I want to walk on very thin ice here. Because Apollo is pansexual. And my issue with the way that Apollo is written has nothing to do with his sexuality. It comes more so from the fact that he is very, very, what's the word I'm looking for? Loose is the wrong word. There's a specific word I'm looking for. He is very, not polyamorous, but he really doesn't seem to care about having multiple relationships. And to me, as the reader, what I like about my ships, so for example, like Percy and Annabeth and all of the other relationships that we have in previous series, the reason that they feel so strong to me and that I relate to them so strongly is because it's a one-on-one connection. Whereas with Lester, he has a lot of past relationships, a lot of past lovers, and he tries to get us to sympathize with him for his love that is lost. But it's hard to do that because it's not a single person, because he is so kind of ambiguous with his relationships, if that makes any sense. There's some weird moments where he flirts with people that he shouldn't flirt with, especially when you think of age gaps and like family relationships. He hits on his sister at one point. Not Artemis, he hits on his half-sister Talia. Compared to the rest of the series, I really don't like the way that the romance is written. It has nothing to do with sexuality. I think like The Sun and the Star is way, way beyond what anything Trials of Apollo does because of the fact that it is a one-on-one connection. And with Trials of Apollo, he is just so... Apollo's a bit of a man whore, and it's hard to sympathize with his relationships because of that. Flick Street Productions says, I know about Onyx and Obsidian. I even read the visual novel adaptations of them on the interactive visual novel app called Chapters. Oh, I've never checked that out before. I'll have to do that. Forever HK says, thank you so much. I'm looking forward to Alex Rider. I've never read beyond the first book, so I am looking forward to it as well. It was one of my favorite movies growing up. I know it's a bad movie, but I'm nostalgic for it. Diz says, he thinks like a god. Yeah, and I get that, but it makes him less sympathetic because of that. And he continues to push it in a way that it feels like Rick is trying to get us to sympathize with him. And it's hard to do that because I just simply don't care. Fluid still isn't quite the word I'm looking for. Yeah, I don't know what I'm looking for. He's very open with his relationships. I don't know. Emma Kincaid says, thank you. No one's been answering me, so thank you. Yeah, I hope I answered your questions there. I'm happy to answer as many questions as you guys want to. I don't have any more pre-prepared questions, so I'll wait for you guys in the chat. But otherwise, we can start wrapping things up fairly soon here as well. I wanted to give one more shout out to all of my Patreon people. My League 2 tier members, Brandon Doty, Mr. Taper, Rockin' Ryan 99, X-Ray, Rania, Katie Rose, Knickerdoodles, Hessa, Sernija Srinivasan, Suzanne William James, Squish, Jared Parnell, League 1 member, Sneovatics, and my champion tier members, John Buck, Donald Easter, Dalton Bailey, Lydia Bryant, Joseph Morrill, Zhukov Crawford, and Set. Those champion members, like I mentioned earlier, are the people that at the beginning of every month, I send them for free a copy of what we are covering over on Patreon at the start of that month. So if you guys want to join and get a free book at the beginning of every month, that's just $25 a month or more if you want to join. You can also support me by buying merchandise down with the description link below. If you guys remember from my Sea of Monsters reading, I did in fact say I ate the kitchen table instead of I ate at the kitchen table. My wife was so kind to make a shirt out of it using the Percy Jackson font and a little trident. You guys can buy that in plenty of colors and plenty of different sizes and styles if that's something you're interested in and want to support me with. What kit are you wearing today? Good question. This is just Chelsea. This is a Christian Pulisic uniform from 3 years ago, maybe. I have a big collection of soccer kits. I try to rotate them through every live stream. Last week, I think I was wearing either a Pacific or a DC one. How did your brackets do? Good question. Actually, very well. My women's bracket this year for the college basketball tournament was really solid. I had 3 out of the 4 Final Four teams correct. And my first round, I only had 2 or 3 wrong. And then I got the champion wrong. I had South Carolina winning. My men's bracket, I had Florida winning, so I ended up winning my family pool. And then hockey, of course, starts. The Final Four starts tonight, and I have Denver winning, so we'll see how that one goes. John Neary says, do you think a Celtic Riordan verse novel would be interesting? Yes, I do, and I want to say it's already been done, not by him, but in his extended universe. So if you're unfamiliar, Rick Riordan has kind of pulled an Oprah, would be the best way to put it. He's not writing as many books as he used to. He's maybe doing one a year, and how he's making money elsewise is he's publishing other authors whose books are similar to his, and he calls it Rick Riordan Presents. It's basically like Oprah's book club. But all of these authors who are of varying national, ethnic, racial backgrounds are writing mythological stories for their own cultures. And so I think there's like 2 different Korean ones, there's a Persian one, there's a Middle Eastern Arabic one, there is a Native American one, a Mesoamerican one, an African one, and all of these different authors are writing basically Percy Jackson books about their own cultures and being published by Rick Riordan. And I want to say there might be a Celtic one out there, if not in the works. So yes, I would be interested in reading that. I definitely have said before that I'm not promising to read any of them on the channel because of the fact that I have been doing Rick Riordan for 2.5 years, and I think I'm just worn out. And I promise to do all of his books, but I'm not going to do all of the ones that he's published. Emma Kincaid says, are you Christian? Sorry if that's a weird question. No, totally fine. I typically answer this every other live stream maybe, but yes, that is why I have full readings of the Bible on the channel. Forever HK says, Alex Rider is really good, but it starts to get heavy after the 9th book. Again, I think you'd really enjoy Keys to the Kingdom by Garth Nix. It's not too long, very fantastical, and easy to read. Well, I'll have to check it out. Yeah, I'm curious. Like I said, I've never read past Stormbreaker, so I don't know what the heaviness of the later books you're referring to is. But that almost makes me want to read them more, because I'm kind of into heavier themes and stuff. Part of why I like Magnus Chase is because it's a little more mature than Percy Jackson. It's got a little more, little darker, little more swearing, little more mature themes to it. And that's the kind of literature that I like, is a little more mature, a little more heavy, that sort of thing. With that being said, unless I see anything pop up in the chat in the next few minutes here, I think we're going to call this one to a close. Like I said, it was a bit of a shorter live stream. I think next time, because of the audience figures that we've had between the different channels, we've kind of been bouncing forth with our live streams. I think in 2 weeks' time, we're going to do a live stream on our other channel that seems to get more traction and get more people in the chat. But thank you to everyone who's joined us in the chat today, for everyone who's shown up to watch. If you're watching this afterward, I mentioned earlier, feel free to drop any questions that you want answered on the next live stream in the comments down below, and we'll hopefully get to them in 2 weeks' time. But that's all I got for you guys. Thank you so much for continuing to support me, to support all of the works that we have on the channel. If you want to join the Discord server, we also have that as an option. I do want to kind of walk you guys through that real quick if you're comfortable with me doing that. So if I go change my screen here and then click on Discord, hopefully it blocks all of the stuff that you guys have here. But if you guys join, it's going to give you a little welcome message in the chat here. And then on the left side, you should have an option to click something called Server Access. And if you click that, all of these different emojis are going to give you access to different fandoms. And so there are 3 different messages here where you can get access to a Discord chat about Percy Jackson, one about Harry Potter, Game of Thrones, Narnia, Star Wars, Hunger Games, Dune, The Radiation Effect, Artemis Fowl, Divergent, the Books of Ember, Aragon, Fablehaven, Kane Chronicles, Lord of the Rings, Lux, Magnus Chase, Red Rising, Twilight, and The Witcher. That is how you get access to all of those, and then you should be able to kind of roam around all the way over on the side and find all these different chats. You can just chat in general. You can talk spoilers for different books in kind of a private spoiler chat. You can add some fan art or fan-made stories if you have some that you want to share. But that is how our Discord server works, and I would love to have you join us by using the link in the description below if that's something you're interested in. So thank you very much for, like I said, supporting me on this channel, for continuing to support everything that we do and all of my personal writing stuff. Check out all of the other channels if you haven't already, the 2 separate audiobook channels, as well as my 3rd channel if you're interested in knowing my thoughts about Black Mirror. All of those are available in the links below. Otherwise, we're hoping to see you in 2 weeks' time. See you for the debut of the new Hunger Games novel coming out on Sunday. Otherwise, we'll see you very, very soon.